In the time before memory settled into words, when the sky still carried the raw scent of creation and the earth trembled under the weight of unnamed dreams, there lived a boy whose journey would one day echo across the silent corridors of destiny. He was not born into greatness, nor carved from heroic prophecy. Instead, he emerged from a world that never paused long enough to see him, an ordinary star waiting to be awakened. His village, nestled between fields that glowed gold at sunrise and forests that whispered ancient secrets at night, believed that each child carried a spark of something divine, though most never uncovered the flame. But the boy, quiet and observant, felt in his bones that the world was offering him more than survival. It was offering him a path, a narrow and thorned one, but a path nonetheless. Yet the world he lived in was neither kind nor patient. Life arrived not in soft breezes, but in storms that pushed him before he was ready. From his earliest memories, he learned that dreams must be fought for. The days were long, the nights longer, and the silence held questions he never knew how to ask. He watched people move through life like shadows, repeating the same motions, unaware of the chains they carried. Something in him resisted that fate. Something in him whispered that there was more. But greatness, when it comes, does not arrive with trumpets. It arrives quietly, like a seed buried under miles of dirt. And so it was with the boy. His journey began not with triumph, but with loss. A loss so deep it reshaped the walls of his heart. A loss that tore away whatever innocence he had left and replaced it with a fire that refused to die. In the dark nights that followed, he learned the ache of loneliness. He tasted doubt. He explored the edges of his own breaking. And yet, in the hollow spaces of grief, he found something unexpected, a strength forming quietly, almost invisibly, beneath the surface. Every hero is forged twice, once by the world and once by themselves. The world had already dealt its blow. Now it was his turn. He began walking down a road that few dared to take, the road inward. While others chased noise, he chased silence. While others drowned themselves in distraction, he sought clarity. The world, with all its chaos, tried to pull him back, but something deeper kept pushing him forward. Some nights he felt lost. Some days he doubted every step. Yet his journey continued, guided not by certainty, but by stubborn hope. He traveled far beyond his village, across landscapes etched with myth, mountains that touched the hem of the heavens, rivers older than kingdoms, ruins that hummed with the ghosts of forgotten civilizations. And with each step, he changed. His body grew stronger, his mind sharper, his spirit heavier, and somehow lighter at the same time. He learned from wanderers, warriors, sages, and strangers. From the old man who taught him that courage lived not in the chest, but in the spine. From the monk who told him that true strength comes not from fists, but from refusal. From the girl who showed him that even broken hearts can light their own way. But the world was not passive. Darkness followed him like an unspoken prophecy. There were nights when shadows watched him from the tree line. Days when doubt stalked him more fiercely than any beast. There were voices, both within and without, that whispered, "Turn back. You are not enough." And yet, he continued. Because some journeys are not choices. They are inevitabilities written long before birth. Eventually, he reached a place unlike any other, the threshold of mirrors. A vast stone valley where the wind carried the voices of one's truest self. It was said that no one crossed it unchanged. Here he faced not beasts, not men, but his own reflection, not in glass, but in truth. He saw the weight of his grief, the wounds he tried to hide, the anger he carried like a second heartbeat. He saw the child he had been and the man he was becoming. And he did not turn away. He walked deeper into the valley, and the valley walked deeper into him. From this trial he emerged quieter, but not weaker. Softer, but not fragile. He carried both shadow and light with equal reverence. For he now understood. Greatness was not the absence of darkness, but the willingness to stand within it without surrender. His journey took him onward, into lands where the sky changed colors with the moon's moods, where the earth grew flowers that bloomed for a single breath, where storms spoke in riddles and mountains sang at dawn. And in these strange, sacred places, he found pieces of himself he never knew were missing. Courage buried under fear, compassion buried under pride, power buried under self-doubt. Yet every ascent demands a descent. And so, just when he believed he had reached the edge of destiny's map, the world revealed another test. He encountered a kingdom drowning in silence. A land once vibrant, now suffocating beneath a curse that erased dreams. People walked without purpose. Children forgot how to laugh. The sky itself had dimmed. A heavy stillness haunted the air, as though time had lost interest. And he realized, painfully, that the darkness he had wrestled within himself now stretched across an entire world. The curse had a source, a tower carved from obsidian and moonlight, pulsing like a wounded heart. Legends whispered that within it lived a being forged from fear itself, a creature that fed on despair. The boy, older now, stronger now, yet still carrying the memory of who he once was, felt an unmistakable call. The same fire that had carried him through grief now demanded that he step forward, for himself, for this kingdom, for every soul trapped in suffocation. He approached the tower alone, not because he wanted to, but because some battles belonged to no one else. The air thickened with every step. The shadows moved with intention. The ground pulsed like the breath of a sleeping giant. Yet he did not stop. When he reached the tower doors, they opened not from force, but from recognition. Inside, the darkness was absolute, a void that swallowed sound and shape. It felt alive, watching, waiting. And then, from the abyss, two eyes opened, eyes that mirrored his own pain, magnified into monstrosity. The creature formed itself from smoke and regret, tall as a nightmare, but strangely human in its movement. And when it spoke, its voice sounded like his own fears given form. "You should have turned back," it whispered. "You were never meant for greatness." The boy, now a man, felt the familiar tremor of doubt. But he also remembered the threshold of mirrors. He remembered the strength of his scars. So he replied, quietly but firmly, "Greatness isn't what I seek." Truth is, the battle that followed was not one of swords or brute strength. It was a battle of will, of belief, of memory. The creature attacked with every fear he had buried, every mistake he had made, every doubt he had ever felt. It tried to drown him in the echo of his own insecurities. But he fought back, with every lesson learned, every wound endured, every tear shed on nights he thought he would break. His strength was not in denying his darkness, but in accepting it. And that acceptance shattered the curse. The tower crumbled. Light returned to the sky. The kingdom exhaled after years of suffocation. And the man who had once been a lost boy stood amidst the ruins, knowing that he had become something more, not a hero in the traditional sense, but a witness of his own becoming. Someone who chose to rise when falling would have been easier. He returned to his village, though not as a savior. He came back as someone who finally understood himself. The fields still glowed golden. The forests still whispered ancient secrets. Life had not changed, but he had. And that, he realized, was the true victory. For the measure of a person is not in the battles they win, but in the ones they survive. Not in the crowns they wear, but in the truths they embrace. His journey had carved him open, reshaped him, refined him. And in the quiet of his soul, he carried the knowledge that every moment of suffering, every doubt, every trial had been part of the forging. And though the world would forget his name, though no monuments would rise in his honor, the universe itself had witnessed his transformation. And sometimes, that is the highest form of legacy. For greatness is not a thunderclap. It is a flicker, steady, stubborn, eternal, carried by those who refuse to surrender their own becoming. And so his story lives not in the songs of bards, but in the silent courage of anyone who dares to rise. His journey was not meant to be remembered. It was meant to be felt. The price was eternity in chains. The words hung in the air like iron, heavy, rusted, impossible to ignore. The oracle's voice trembled with the weight of centuries, a voice that had predicted the rise and fall of empires, the suffering of heroes, and the slow decay of divine faith. And still Arian stepped forward, fists clenched, jaw tight. His heartbeat was steady, as if he had been expecting this all along. He did not flinch. He did not retreat. He simply said, in a voice stripped of hesitation, stripped of fear, stripped of anything except truth, "So let me pay the price." A long silence followed, the kind that only ancient beings could produce. A silence that measured a man not by his strength, but by his willingness to surrender everything. Then the oracle laughed, not cruelly, not mockingly, but with the exhausted amusement of someone who had seen far too many humans make promises far too large for their mortal hands to carry. It was the laugh of someone tired of destiny, tired of watching mortals chase thunder and gods chase mortals. "And the same way you already are," she whispered. Her voice softened, as if she were speaking not to a man, but to the thread of fate itself. As if Arian had already begun paying the price the moment he chose to walk into her chamber. The room darkened at her words. Shadows lengthened, stretching like rivers across the stone floor. The thunder outside rose, a slow rumble that climbed into a violent crescendo. The air trembled, pulsed with something ancient, older than Olympus, older than magic, older than memory. A force primordial and alive. Then, as abruptly as it had risen, everything stopped. Stillness fell like snow. The oracle slumped back into her seat as if struck by an invisible bolt. Her mouth opened, but no more words came, only smoke. Thick, gray, curling smoke that drifted upward like dying prayers. A prophecy had been spoken, and now the vessel that carried it was empty once more. Arian left without another word, but her vision did not leave him. It followed him in the flicker of every flame he lit, in the hiss of every molten metal he shaped, in the dark corners of every dream that interrupted his sleep. The gods had spoken. His path was set. And yet even Olympus could not predict what a dying world might do when handed back its fire. For before one could ascend Olympus, one had to earn the mountain's recognition. The legends said that the base of the mountain was not made of stone or snow, but of soul, compressed, ancient, whispering. That beneath its foundation lay a gate sealed by silence and guarded by the oldest fear in creation. Cerberus, the hound of Hades, the three-headed sentinel of the underworld, the one creature before whom even gods hesitated. No one could pass that gate without first touching death. Arian did not question it. That was the thing about him. Not strength, not divinity, not stubbornness, but certainty. He had studied myths the way blacksmiths study heat, not casually, but intimately, as if each legend were a pattern on an anvil, waiting to be struck into truth. Wearily, with the understanding of a man who knew what awaited him under the roots of Olympus, Arian accepted his next trial. To reach the eternal flame, he would have to descend into the underworld itself. He did not prepare with armor. He prepared with craft. For 3 days and 3 nights, Arian worked at his forge. He did not sleep. He did not speak. He shaped a collar, not of submission to a beast, but of understanding. A gift, not a leash. It was forged of obsidian that drank the light around it, iron tempered in the coldest river he could find, and at its center, he set the final ember from his mother's forge, the one she had kept burning through war, famine, and despair. Into the metal he carved 3 names, one for each of Cerberus's heads: memory, loyalty, grief. He spoke them aloud as he worked, not as labels, but as truths. For he knew what the hound was made of, not just fear, but devotion. On the 4th day, exhausted yet unbroken, he stood before the shadowed mouth of a cave said to descend forever. The wind there was not cold in the way winter was cold. It did not sting the skin. It scraped the soul. And the air carried not the stench of decay but the faint, eerie fragrance of forgotten prayers, those whispered once and abandoned by the gods. He entered. The darkness deepened with each step. He walked past bones that glowed faintly, as if remembering the lives they once belonged to, past torches that burned without flame, casting ghost light across the cavern walls. Down and down, deeper than memory, deeper than mortal stories dared to go, until he heard it. Breathing. Slow. Massive. Layered. like three separate storms dreaming in unison. Cerberus. Arian stepped into a clearing carved from centuries of silence. There, curling upon a bed of ash and bone, lay the hound. Three heads, each twitching in a different rhythm as if caught in separate dreams. Its fur was blacker than absence, darker than a void. Its eyes were closed, yet the skin around them trembled with instinct. Even sleeping, the beast radiated a presence so monumental it felt like gravity. Arian did not draw a weapon. Instead, he approached slowly, quietly. He knelt, not in fear, but in respect. He held out the collar with steady hands. Then he began to hum, softly, tenderly. It was the song his mother had sung to him as a child, the lullaby she used whenever the world felt too vast, too sharp, too cruel. A lullaby not meant to quiet nightmares, but to remind a soul that even pain had purpose. The middle head lifted first. Slowly, the left opened one amber eye, glowing faintly in the dark. The right snarled, a low rumble that shook dust from the ceiling, but stopped midway, as if the sound itself recognized the tune. They listened, and in that rarest of moments, in the heart of death, silence bowed its head. Arian slipped the collar on. Cerberus exhaled, a long, heavy breath that swept through the cavern like the sigh of a god. The ground trembled, and behind Arian, the hidden door of the underworld opened, not with fury, not with violence, but with something far rarer. Respect. Arian had touched death, and in return, death had stepped aside. The road upward to Olympus was no road at all. There were no markers, no stars to guide him, no paths carved by the feet of heroes. Only sheer rock, biting wind, and whispers that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. The climb was brutal. His mortal flesh bled. His divine blood burned. Every inch of the mountain resisted him, as if Olympus itself challenged his right to ascend. Then Hermes appeared, not with thunder, not with a flash of godly radiance. Hermes arrived in silence, because a trickster did not need spectacle to make an entrance. He stood on a narrow ledge, dressed like a wandering traveler. A loose cloak tossed carelessly over one shoulder, sandals laced with feathers that moved even when the wind was still, eyes sharp as broken glass and twice as dangerous. A crooked grin rested upon his lips. "Well," he said casually, spinning a coin between his fingers, "I thought you'd be taller." Arian didn't stop climbing, didn't bow, didn't react. He simply kept moving upward, eyes fixed on the peak. "I know why you're here," Hermes continued, now walking beside him without ever lifting a foot. He simply existed wherever he wished to be. "You want to bring fire back to the mortals. Sweet, noble, stupid." Arian paused, just long enough to say, "Then stop me." Hermes chuckled. "Stop you? Oh no, I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to educate you. Someone has to make sure you understand the terms of the story you're trying to rewrite." He leaned closer. "You're walking into the heart of Olympus, into the god's vault, into a realm that was never meant for your hands, a story that isn't yours to tell. And yet," Arian said, "here I am." The grin faltered, just slightly, enough for the wind to notice. "You're trying to restore a balance that was broken for a reason," Hermes said. "Fire was a gift once, a mistake, and now the gods guard it the way dragons guard their gold, not because it's precious, but because it's dangerous." Arian stared at him, expression steady. "Then they've forgotten what danger looks like." For the first time, Hermes' expression soured. The air tightened around them, the coin in his hand vanished, and his wings twitched with irritation. "You think you're Prometheus?" he asked quietly, coldly. "You're not even a flicker compared to him." Arian did not blink. "I'm not trying to be him. I'm trying to finish what he started." Hermes moved in a blur. One step, two fingers pressed to Arian's chest. And then, pain. Not of bone, not of flesh. Something deeper. A thread inside him twisted, pulled taut, and scorched him from the inside. "The fire you seek," Hermes whispered, "will burn everything you are." Then he vanished. The mountain groaned. Thunder rippled across the sky. A storm began, not of rain, but consequence. A trial woven into the very air. Arian climbed higher, cursed, but unbroken. and the curse settled into Arian's chest like frost in the lungs, cold, sharp, spreading slowly. At first it was barely noticeable, a slight tightening when he breathed, a subtle heat beneath the skin. But the higher he climbed, the more it sank into him, biting deeper, coiling around his ribs, consuming him inch by inch like an invisible fire feeding on his soul. Still he climbed, for some destinies were not accepted. They were forged. The words left the oracle's cracked lips like embers falling into snow, and for a breath the room forgot how to breathe. And the price, she rasped, was eternity in chains. Arian did not flinch. He stepped forward, fists balled, jaw set with the quiet stubbornness of a man who had already accepted the worst thing fate could ask of him. "Then let me pay it," he said, voice steady, though something fragile tremored beneath it. For a moment, nothing existed. Then the oracle laughed. Not cruelly, not mockingly, but in the weary tone of someone who had watched countless mortals offer themselves to destinies far heavier than they understood. Her eyes dimmed. "You will," she whispered, "the same way you already are." The oil lamps guttered. Thunder rolled across the heavens, shaking dust from the rafters. The air thickened, humming with an ancient presence that tasted of storms and cracked stone. Something unseen pressed against the walls, pressing them inward as though the whole world leaned in to listen. Then everything died into stillness. The oracle's back arched, her mouth opened as though to speak, yet no words emerged. Only smoke drifted out, curling like serpents that dissolved before touching the ground. Her body crumpled into the chair, hollow as a burnt-out candle. The prophecy was finished. Arian left without speaking, but the vision refused to leave him. It coiled behind his eyes. It crept into his dreams. It clung to him in the sparks that flew from his hammer, in the glow of molten iron, in the shadows thrown by the forge his mother had once tended. The gods had carved a road before him, whether he desired it or not. And Olympus, aloof, eternal, arrogant, watched him take the first step. Yet even Olympus, for all its pride, could not foresee what the world would become when fire returned to mortal hands. For no one ascends the mountain simply by walking. One must be recognized by it. One must be judged worthy. And Olympus bowed to no one who had not been tested. Legends claimed that the mountain did not rest on rock at all, but on the border of spirit. Beneath its foundation lay a gate, sealed not by locks but silence. Behind it waited the oldest fear creation had birthed, Cerberus, the three-headed sentinel of the underworld. To pass, a soul had to brush against death itself. Arian did not question this truth. He had studied myths the way craftsmen study their tools, intimately, relentlessly, knowing that someday their edges might cut him. He understood what slept beneath Olympus. And so, to reach the immortal flame, he prepared not with armor or blade, but with craft. For 3 days and 3 nights, he worked without rest. Metal sang. Sparks leapt. His hands blistered, bled, healed, and blistered again. What he forged was not a weapon, but an offering. A collar rod of obsidian and black iron, woven together with the final ember saved from his mother's dying forge. Into its surface he carved 3 words, each meant for one of Cerberus' heads: memory, loyalty, grief. At dawn of the 4th morning, Arian stood at the mouth of the cave said to descend forever. The air here did not bite the skin. Instead, it slid into the soul like a whisper of something forgotten. The scent was not rot, but the stale fragrance of prayers abandoned. He stepped inside. The dark pressed in immediately. Bones littered the path, some shaped like men, others belonging to creatures long lost to myth. They glowed faintly, their pale light pulsing as if remembering old pain. Torches lined the path, unlit yet smoldering, as though fire had touched them centuries ago and refused to let go. Deeper he walked. The temperature did not change, but something else did. The air thickened, weighted with breath. 1 breath, 3 breaths. A tidal inhalation drawn in different rhythms, but exhaled as one. Cerberus. The cavern opened around him. There, on a bed of ash and bones, lay the beast. Fur black as the void, paws the size of anvils. 3 heads rested on folded legs, each twitching to its own dream. The middle head snored softly. The right growled at phantoms. The left twitched an ear, sensing something stirring in the deep. Arian approached without drawing a blade. He knelt, setting aside fear the way a smith sets aside impurities before forging steel. With both hands he lifted the collar and began to hum. A soft melody, crude and simple, yet born of solace. The lullaby his mother had sung when storms rattled their home and the night felt too large. The right head's eyes snapped open, pupils burning like molten amber. It growled, teeth bared. The left rose next, wary but silent. And finally the middle head lifted slowly, blinking in recognition of the tune, as if the ancient beast had once known gentleness. One by one, the head stilled. In that poised hush, Arian slipped the collar onto the middle neck. A deep rumble echoed. Not anger, not hunger, but acceptance. Cerberus exhaled, a gust that smelled of earth untouched by sun. Behind the creature, the great gate groaned open, the stone trembling beneath its weight. Death had allowed him passage. The road beyond was no road at all. Olympus, when approached by mortal feet, reshaped itself into a labyrinth of cliffs and ridges carved by storms. The mountain did not guide. It challenged. Jagged rock tore through Arian's boots. Wind thrashed against him, howling like ghosts denied rest. The higher he climbed, the less the world resembled anything mortal. Grass vanished. Soil gave way to stones streaked with veins of gold. Even birds abandoned the sky, their songs swallowed by the thin, inhospitable air. The stars overhead seemed to retreat, pulling their light away from the trespasser daring to ascend the realm meant only for gods. The mountain punished him. He slipped more than once. Once he nearly plummeted into a ravine that stretched so deep the bottom dissolved into darkness. Only the ember Hermes had burned into his chest saved him, a sudden flare of heat stabilizing his balance, as though the flame inside him refused to let him die before reaching his purpose. But Arian kept climbing, because every time his strength faded, he saw the faces of those below, cold children curled near dead hearths, villages wrapped in frost, a world slowly dimming. He saw his mother, coughing over a dying forge, hands cracked from labor, stubbornly giving warmth to others while she herself froze. No, he could not fail. Olympus gathered its storms against him. Lightning crawled across the sky, pacing like restless gods hungry for spectacle. Thunder cracked, splitting the heavens like a warning. Shadows moved where no shadows should. The ruins of forgotten temples emerged from the mist. Athena's likeness worn away, altars shattered, pillars broken by time or by fear. Arian realized something as old as Olympus itself. The gods were not almighty. They were frightened. Frightened that a mortal would reclaim fire without bowing. Frightened that someone outside their bloodline would carry the light that once defined them. In their fear, they sent everything the mountain could muster. Visions of failure, illusions of death, cold sharp enough to pierce bone. But Arian pushed upward, each breath a battle, each step a promise. Then, without thunder or spectacle, someone appeared. A figure stood casually on a narrow ledge, watching him with the ease of a man observing a traveler lose his way. He wore a wanderer's cloak, sandals tied with feathers, and a grin that flirted with mockery. Hermes. Well, the god said, flipping a coin between his fingers, I imagined you'd be taller. Arian didn't stop. Hermes drifted beside him without taking a single step, as if the air itself ferried him. You climb for fire, he said. Sweet, noble, foolish. His grin widened. And absolutely doomed. Arian halted only long enough to murmur, I know why you're here. Hermes chuckled, the sound sharp as broken marble. Stop you? Why would I? I'm only here to make sure you understand the bargain. His tone shifted, losing its playfulness. You walk toward the god's vault, toward a relic older than Olympus itself, toward a story that doesn't belong to you. And yet I'm walking, Arian said softly. The smile faded. Hermes' wings twitched. You think the flame is a gift. It wasn't. It was a mistake. His eyes hardened. And now the gods guard it like a dragon guards gold. not because it is precious, but because it is dangerous. Arian stared back. Then they've forgotten what danger truly looks like. For the first time, Hermes' charm cracked. The coin disappeared from his palm as though swallowed by the air. He stepped forward and pressed 2 fingers to Arian's chest. Fire roared through Arian, not heat, but agony, twisting something deep within, unraveling threads he'd never known existed. "The flame you seek," Hermes whispered, "will consume everything you are." Then he vanished, leaving only echoing thunder behind. The storm broke in full. Not rain, but consequence. The sky writhed, clouds splitting like wounds. Arian felt the cold bloom in his chest, first a sting, then a creeping frost that hollowed him from within. Erosion, not injury. As if the mountain itself sought to strip away his humanity, piece by piece, until nothing remained but the raw core of what he truly was. Yet he climbed, and finally, through the swirling mist, he saw it. The summit. Not crowned in gold, not guarded by gods, but silent. At its center stood a pedestal of scorched stone supporting a single brazier. The eternal flame. It glowed white, pure, relentless, aware. It did not flicker. It regarded him. Arian approached. The heat did not scorch him. It seeped into him, recognizing the mark Hermes had burned into his heart. His pulse aligned with its rhythm. He reached out. Time unraveled. He saw cities illuminated by stolen fire. He saw civilizations built around flame and destroyed by it. He saw his mother's forge blazing in winter. He saw Prometheus chained, suffering endlessly for gifting fire to mortals. The gods had not punished him for rebellion. They had punished him for giving mortals freedom. Arian could turn back. Let humanity freeze. Let Olympus remain unchallenged. Let fire remain a myth. But then he heard a whisper, "Callista," and everything inside him hardened with purpose. He seized the flame. It tore through him, not burning, reshaping. His bones cracked and reformed. His veins glowed. His skin shimmered with molten light. He fell, screaming without sound, as the flame poured into him until the brazier dimmed, then died entirely. The eternal flame had chosen a new vessel. Arian collapsed, breathing smoke. Light pulsed beneath his ribs. Warmth drifted from him in faint tendrils, curling down the mountain toward the world waiting below. The mountain softened. Winds quieted. Stone shifted gently beneath his feet. He was no longer an intruder. He was a torch. Descending felt like walking through a dream. Frost melted around his steps. The air brightened. He felt the memories of every fire that had ever burned. Caves lit by prehistoric hands. The forges that built empires. The flames that raised cities. Fire had always carried both creation and destruction. But this time he would guide it, not unleash it. He passed the cavern where Cerberus had once slept. The guardian was gone, as though even death acknowledged what Arian had become. At last he reached the world below. A frozen village stood in silence, its hearths cold, its people huddled in darkness. When they saw him, they did not flee. They approached slowly, sensing warmth radiating from his very presence. Arian lifted his hand. A single ember leapt from his fingertip into the nearest hearth. It flared to life. Then another, and another. Fire bloomed across the village, chasing away centuries of cold. His body cracked like cooling obsidian. His hair glowed like molten gold. He was dying, yet not fading. He was becoming something beyond mortal or god. He had not stolen fire. He had become fire. And as warmth spread across the world, carried from hearth to hearth, city to city, the people whispered his name, not in worship, but in gratitude. No tomb was built for him, no statue carved. But wherever fire burned with gentleness instead of hunger, his legacy lived. No hymns rose in his honor. No temple bells rang. No soldiers marched. No final war cry thundered across the mountains to mark his end. Yet somehow, Arian never truly vanished. After the warmth returned to the world, quiet wonders began to ripple across the frozen lands. In distant hamlets where no stranger had traveled in months, hearths suddenly sparked to life in the dead of night. Forests that had been locked in ice bloomed with flowers in a single evening. Blacksmiths found their forges roaring to heat with barely a touch. Children curled beside dying embers whispered to their parents that they had seen a figure made of light standing by the flames just before they flared alive. No one could explain these miracles, yet the stories were always the same. They spoke of a man made of fire, a wanderer whose body had long since burned away, leaving behind something elemental, something that walked like memory itself. Arian had kept moving until nothing physical remained to move with. What he had been, flesh, bone, blood, voice, had dissolved into warmth, into smoke, into a spark that he offered freely to the world. His mother's abandoned forge was the final place touched by what remained of him. The old anvil had not seen a flame in decades, its stone walls cold as a tomb. One winter night, a lone traveler claimed he spotted a boy hammering a blazing object upon the anvil, white-hot and radiant. When the traveler blinked, the boy was gone. But the forge fire roared higher than it ever had in living memory. And for the first time in ages, the place smelled of glowing metal and old magic. The gods felt the shift. Olympus trembled, not with rage, but with recognition that the sacred flame they once guarded had slipped beyond their reach. Yet they did not retaliate. They did not hurl thunder or unleash curses, because even the immortals understood the truth. Arian had not rebelled out of pride or hunger for glory. He had shown them what their gift was meant to be. And so the eternal flame, once guarded and rationed by divine decree, now lived everywhere, across every village, every towering citadel, every lonely cabin perched on a mountain ridge. It glowed in the bowls of soup strangers shared with one another. It flickered in candles placed by grieving hands. It blazed in torches carried by rebels searching for hope in the darkest corners of the world. And through all of it, people spoke his name, softly, gratefully, like a prayer not meant for any god but for the warmth that lingered after he was gone. Some swore that when their hearth dimmed for no reason, Arian's presence passed by, quiet, unseen. Others insisted that the crackling of fire held a rhythm like a blacksmith's hammer striking metal in steady patterns, echoing the heartbeat of the boy who had carried the flame. Arian never died. He simply became warmth itself. Not a god, not a legend carved in marble, just a boy who gave away everything so the world would remember how to glow again. Fire Leon of Sparta, rewritten continuation, integrated, expanded, same meaning but fresh. Fire. In the land of Sparta, where boys were trained to wield blades before they could string words together, where honor was carved deeper into one's bones than blood, women were no less formidable. Among them lived a girl whose name struck through the marble corridors like the sharp clang of bronze on stone, Leon, daughter of Commander Adrastus. She came into the world beneath an eclipse red as spilled war blood, while wolves howled, as if greeting a warrior reborn. Midwives whispered she had been touched by Ares himself. By the age of 12, she had thrown her brothers flat on the wrestling grounds. At 16, she led a hunting party into the jagged Taygetos mountains and returned with 3 wild boars lashed behind her chariot. Her face calm, her eyes steady. Leon did not simply earn respect. She commanded it. Men moved aside when she strode through the agora with her silent, iron-backed posture. Women watched her with a blend of envy and reverence. She rarely wasted words. When she did speak, each sentence was sharpened like an arrowhead, purposeful, cutting, flawless. Yet beneath the armor, beneath the reputation of a girl forged in Sparta's fire, something else lived inside her, something few ever saw. At night, when she unlaced her cuirass and let the silence of the world settle over her, Leon would gaze up at the stars with an expression that no battlefield ever drew from her. When the torches dimmed and the city grew still, she felt a hunger not for conquest, not for glory, but for something the Spartan code had no word for. Wonder, magic, peace. Every full moon, when Sparta's warriors slept and the world quieted, an unseen force tugged at her heart, drawing her toward the cliffs above the roaring Eurotas. She left behind her spear, her shield, her pride, becoming simply a woman walking beneath the silver sky. The world, she felt, must be larger than Sparta's laws, larger than steel and discipline. She sensed it in her blood like a forgotten melody that she knew she had once heard but could no longer place. Then, on a night when the moon gleamed like a polished blade, Leon's life shifted. She discovered a grove hidden between two cliffs, a place untouched by Spartan footsteps, a pocket of the world older than Sparta, older than Olympus. Trees bent into natural crescents, silvered by moonlight. A still pond lay like a sheet of polished obsidian at the center, and on it floated a swan. It glided like a piece of moonlight torn loose from the sky. Its feathers shimmered in colors she had no name for, not white, not gray, but something that felt like starlight woven into flesh. It moved without disturbing the water, as if the lake itself bowed beneath it. And when it looked at her, its eyes held no fear, no animal instinct, only awareness. Leon froze. Her warrior's instincts whispered danger. Nothing in nature held itself with such calm, such unbroken presence. But the swan did not flee. It watched her, patient, serene, expectant. She stepped closer. The swan tilted its head. Another step, then another, until she stood at the water's edge. Her heartbeat stayed steady. Her hand hovered near the dagger at her thigh, more from habit than alarm. The swan glided forward and bowed. Leon knelt, almost without choosing to. She had witnessed death, birth, triumph, grief, yet nothing so quiet, so impossibly still. She reached out, her fingers brushing its feathers. Warmth, not natural warmth, but the warmth of sunlight captured in living form. Something ancient stirred inside her, not fear, not curiosity, something that felt like a part of herself returning home. The swan blinked and drifted back toward the lake's center. Leon remained kneeling, breath caught between questions and awe. She didn't know what had begun, but she understood deeply that it was no accident. She returned the next full moon, and the next, and the next. No words passed between them, no rituals spoken, only presence. A silent promise formed in the stillness. By autumn, Leon no longer wondered why she came. She simply knew the swan would be waiting, and her world was quietly rearranging itself around that truth. The wars raged far below the hills, but in that silver grove, time froze. Only the moon's cycles mattered now, marking the nights when she stepped away from Sparta's iron weight and allowed the softer, ancient force within her to speak. She began bringing offerings, fresh figs, woven cloth, carved olive wood charms. The swan never accepted them, never ate, never touched. Still she brought them, compelled by something older than logic. She spoke to the swan, not like a commander addressing soldiers, but like a woman whispering secrets she didn't know she had kept buried. She told it of battles she hadn't wanted to fight, of dreams she didn't understand, of a world she longed to see beyond Sparta's walls. The swan listened. Always, it listened. Its warmth radiated beside her like a hidden sun, thawing a part of her she hadn't realized had frozen. She told him everything, things she had never spoken aloud to another living soul. Her father's distance, sharp as winter iron. The victories that filled Sparta with pride but left her heart hollow. The nights she stared at the sky until her eyes burned, wondering if the world held anything beyond blood, discipline, and dust. The swan gave no reply, yet she felt its listening. Not the empty, quiet mortals offered, but a silence that held, absorbed, understood. It was attention without judgment, presence without demand. The kind of listening her commanders never granted, the kind lovers spoke of but never gave, the kind even friends could not fathom. Over the months, loneliness loosened its grip. She braided her hair with care before each meeting, smoothed her robes with trembling hands. She sat beside him for hours, her shoulder resting softly against his wing. Words were scarce, but what she felt in that grove was richer than anything she had felt on the sands of the training fields or the polished stone of the palace. Still, the swan did not flee, did not age, did not shift. Any sensible Spartan would have feared such a creature. Stories whispered of gods in borrowed skins, spirits who lured mortals into ruin, whose affection ended in curses carved on bone. But Leon had stopped believing in Spartan tales long ago. She believed in the warmth of feathers beneath her fingertips, in the bow of the swan's head when she hummed softly under the moon, in the strange certainty that it waited for her, needed her. No confession was spoken, no oaths exchanged, but something ancient began to bloom in the silence. The kind of feeling Spartan law had no name for and Spartan hearts were trained to crush. Though she never dared whisper it, she knew exactly what it was. Love. The swan was not born of earth. Its wings had once carried light across the sky. Its fingers, now folded into feathers, had once drawn songs from a golden lyre. Its name had been woven into prayers, carved in marble, sung by kings and shepherds alike. Apollo, god of radiance, god of music, god of prophecy, now mute, winged, and bound. Long before Leon existed, Apollo had committed a crime in Zeus's eyes. Not through betrayal, not through rebellion, but through honesty. He had spoken against Zeus's punishments, against the cruelty that trickled down from mountain throne to mortal world. He had broken the unspoken rule of Olympus. Do not question the king. Zeus did not strike him dead. He did worse. He unmade him. Apollo's divine form was stripped away, his voice ripped silent, his immortal body bound into that of a swan. Not to teach humility, Zeus did not care for lessons. It was to remind him that even the brightest god could be locked inside shadow. And the curse carried one brutal condition. If ever a mortal discovered who he truly was, the transformation would become eternal. So Apollo waited. Decades melted into centuries. Civilizations rose and crumbled. Mortals abandoned his temples, stopped singing his hymns, forgot his stories. The world grew colder as gods withdrew into their mountain halls. Until the night Leon entered the grove. Her presence cracked something inside him. Something buried so deeply even Zeus had forgotten it still existed. Hope. He had never meant to be found. Yet she kept returning. Again and again. Her voice, soft, untrained, human, was the first thing in ages that made the fire inside him stir. She was no oracle, no priestess, no chosen heroine. She was a warrior carved from bone and discipline, a woman whose hands were made for blades, whose heart had been trained to feel nothing. And yet she saw him, not a symbol, not a threat, not a mystery. She saw him, and she treated him as something sacred. He did not speak, not even in thought. Still, in the bow of his head, in the stillness with which he listened, he answered questions she didn't dare voice. And impossibly, unfathomably, he loved her back. But Sparta noticed her absences. Solitude was acceptable, admired, even, but only to a point. Each full moon, she vanished beyond the walls, slipping past guards, past the watchful eyes of commanders and kin. At first, no one questioned it. She was Leon, unyielding, precise, honored, feared. Her loyalty had never wavered. But Sparta was built on order. Patterns mattered. Deviations whispered of trouble. Rumors grew. She wanders at night. She speaks less in council. Her strikes lack venom. It was true. She had changed. Her movements remained sharp, but no longer cruel. Her voice softened. Her eyes held warmth that had never existed before. Some nights, she even smiled. A quiet smile, as if clutching a secret that not even Olympus could steal. Her father noticed first. Commander Adrastus, whose face had never known gentleness, whose daughters were born to command armies, not listen to their hearts. He summoned her under the guise of strategy. When the chamber emptied and the doors shut, his voice turned to stone. What keeps you from sleep, daughter? Leon gave him silence. His jaw tightened. Do not forget who you are. But she had already begun to shed that version of herself. The one Sparta forged. The one she no longer recognized. The woman she was becoming had been shaped not by bronze and blood, but by moonlight and feathers. Still, Sparta watched. A patrol was ordered to shadow her. She lost them easily. But their report, her vanishing near the olive groves, was enough. Enough to spark fear. Enough to awaken priests who muttered about omens and signs. Enough for elders to claim that the lakes beyond the city had begun to shimmer too brightly. A warrior woman disappearing every full moon? They feared madness. Or worse, a god. Leon felt the walls closing around her. Eyes sharpened wherever she walked. Silence, once her greatest armor, now exposed her. But still she went. Still she sought him. Still she knelt beside the water and forgot the world in the warmth of his feathered body. Because nothing mattered more than the truth she carried in her chest, fragile and blazing. They could never be discovered. If the world uncovered what she knew, if she learned what she already felt, it would shatter them both. The moon was swollen gold that night, hanging low over Sparta like a dying sun. Leon stood in her chamber, hands trembling as she tried to fasten her armor buckle. Something inside her had shifted. A pressure in her ribs, a warning in her heartbeat. The swan had been different last month. More alert, more tense. Its feathers had bristled at distant sounds. Its warmth felt feverish, urgent. And then came the dream. She saw the silver grove, her hands dusted with gold. A statue towering before her, half man, half swan, wings frozen mid-beat. Its sculpted face serene, unmoving. She called a name she didn't know she knew. Apollo. The statue cracked like shattered marble. A voice roared, not around her, but inside her bones. Truth will freeze what love has kindled. She woke gasping, the name still burning her mouth. She tried to dismiss it. Dreams meant nothing. But warriors knew when fear was real. This was prophecy. The next dawn, she left the city earlier than ever, her pulse trembling with urgency she didn't comprehend. Her feet carried her not along her usual path, but deeper into the hills, through unfamiliar trees and thickets untouched by memory. There, veiled behind curtains of moss and ivy, she found an altar. Ancient, broken, forgotten, and carved into its cracked stone, glowing faintly beneath the grime of centuries, was a single, unmistakable symbol. One she had seen only in childhood stories and temple murals. Her breath stopped. Her world rearranged itself in a heartbeat. All the fragments snapped together. All the whispers of warmth, the impossible stillness, the dreams, the fear. Everything made sense. The truth struck her like a blade she'd never seen coming. The warmth of the swan, the quiet intelligence in its eyes, the dreams that had haunted her for weeks, the strange ache she carried in her chest, as though her very bones recognized something ancient. The signs had been there all along. Every full moon meeting, every moment the creature watched her with something deeper than animal instinct. It all snapped together in a single breath. The swan wasn't just enchanted. It wasn't merely trapped. It wasn't merely rare. It was divine. He was divine. Her God. And she, without meaning to, without understanding, had broken something sacred. Her foot slipped backward in shock, sending dry leaves clicking beneath her heel. The sound echoed through the grove like a whisper of doom. Behind her, she heard the familiar rustle of feathers, soft as old parchment turning in a library of forgotten myths. The swan had followed her, silent, loyal, unchanged. But the comfort that had once filled her at its presence evaporated. The creature stood there as though carved from moonlight, its gaze drenched in something unbearably tender. As if it knew. As if it had been waiting for this moment with a sorrow too heavy for mortal lungs. And perhaps it had. The grove itself seemed to sense the shift. The air tightened. The hush grew thick, pulsing slow and heavy, the way the world feels before a storm breaks over the sea. The moon's reflection trembled on the lake, as though even its light were afraid to touch the truth. The ancient trees leaned inward, their branches arching like spectators summoned to witness the final chapter of a tragedy centuries in the making. They stood like that, warrior, swan, and altar, caught inside a single frozen heartbeat. The name Apollo still thundered through her skull, ringing endlessly like a spear striking bronze. She turned toward him, though part of her prayed that if she didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't acknowledge the truth aloud, the curse might stay sleeping a little longer. But fate had never been gentle, and curses never slept. The swan took one step toward her, slow and exhausted. Its feathers no longer shimmered with the ethereal glow she'd always sensed beneath the surface. Light dimmed along its wings, flickering like embers gasping for air. The creature, her companion, Her solace looked impossibly fragile, as though knowing she had spoken the truth was killing it already. She stepped closer, one hand lifting, trembling and unsure. Her lips parted. Words failed her. Language itself felt too small, too human. "I know," she whispered. At the sound, the wind stopped. A stillness older than Olympus cloaked the grove. A single feather slipped free from the swan's body and drifted downward, spinning gently as though reluctant to fall. It touched the altar, and the moment it made contact, it dissolved, turned to dust, vanished. The world exhaled, and the transformation began. The swan's neck arched, not in beauty, but in agony. Its wings trembled, blurring into spirals of molten gold. Feathers burst apart into streaks of light that spun around the creature like a dying star, shedding its last brilliance. Its body cracked open as though the shell of bird flesh was too small to contain what it truly was. Wings bent and folded, reshaping themselves into arms. Legs split, reshifting into human form. The glow intensified until the shape was almost impossible to look at. Then the explosion of light faded. Where the swan had once stood, a man now knelt upon the earth, naked, radiant, and broken. Apollo. His hair shimmered like dawn struggling through winter fog. His skin held the soft glow of embers cooling in marble. But his eyes stole her breath. They were beautiful, yes, crafted with divine precision, but dimmed by a sorrow so heavy it hollowed the air around him. She staggered backward, her hand rising to her mouth. She had loved him in silence for so long, loved his stillness, his warmth, his presence. And now that silence had turned against them both. He tried to speak. The curse fought him. His voice cracked through the grove like distant thunder, a sound half-formed, half-strangled. "You weren't meant to know," he whispered. The words hurt as they left him, fragile as ash scattering in the wind. It was the only rule. She fell to her knees. A warrior brought low not by wounds, not by blades, but by truth. "I didn't mean to," she choked out. Her tears fell freely, streaking the hardened plains of her battle-fed face with the softness she had once believed herself incapable of. He smiled. Just once. A god smile. Gentle and devastating. Not a smile of forgiveness, but of farewell. "I know." The earth trembled beneath them, a soundless quake that vibrated through the roots of the forest, through her bones. The divine sentence unfurled like a shadow swallowing the light. The curse, patient, merciless, tightened its grip. Apollo's radiance dimmed. His skin hardened by degrees, flesh turning colder, stiffer, more brittle. Marble crept upward along his arms, freezing golden veins into white stone. His chest rose, once, and the movement echoed like the last breath of a dying world. She grabbed his hands, still warm, still trembling, but she could feel the cold rising inside them. The transformation creeping at the edges of divine bone. His fingers curled around hers in one final, fragile moment before they stilled forever. "No," she gasped. "No, no, please, no." But curses do not negotiate. They do not bend. They do not pity. A thin layer of stone crawled over his fingertips, sealing them. His hands froze around hers. His arms stiffened at the elbows, locked in the gesture of reaching toward her. His wings, half-formed shadows of what they had once been, stiffened into marble arcs. His face, beautiful even in agony, locked mid-expression, a half-smile, half-grief, all love. His eyes remained open, but the light within them extinguished. The last ember of him went dark. Silence followed. A silence deeper than death, heavier than sorrow. Not the quiet before battle. Not the hush after victory. But the absence left when something sacred is taken from the world. Leon knelt, unmoving, her forehead pressed against the stone hand that had once stroked the sun's first melody across the sky. Her tears traced the grooves of his frozen fingers and fell to the earth in slow, steady drops, soft as morning bells. The grove dimmed around her. Even the moon, which had watched them for so many nights, seemed to retreat behind clouds, unwilling to witness the ending. Olympus did not speak. No god descended. No lightning struck. The punishment was complete. Zeus had won. The swan would never fly again. And Apollo, god of light, music, prophecy, was nothing now but a statue imprisoned mid-reach, frozen in the moment his truth was finally known. Leon stayed kneeling long after the last shimmer of magic faded. She did not scream. There was no rage in her, no plea to the heavens, just a quiet that hollowed her from the inside. A quiet that felt like the world had ended in the grove and would never fully resume again. She left everything behind. Her armor lay abandoned at the altar's base. Her sword, once an extension of her heartbeat, rested against the roots of an ancient tree. She walked from Sparta and did not look back. The harsh, disciplined world she had been forged in felt like a stranger's life. The grove became her home, her shelter, her devotion. Each full moon, she returned to the statue, never missing a single cycle, never failing in her vigil. She brought no sacrifices, no garlands, no incense. Just herself, just her presence, just the memory of a love that had bloomed in silence and died in truth. She sat beside Apollo's cold stone hand, fingers brushing marble, wishing warmth back into it as though love alone might defy Zeus. But stone remained stone, and she remained a warrior grieving a god. She touched the stone hand the way she once held it in flesh. Sometimes she would speak to him in a low, steady voice, stories of her battles, memories of childhood, questions she still didn't know how to ask. Other times she only hummed a tune he had never heard, yet the melody felt so strangely theirs that even the trees seemed to lean closer to listen. Most nights, she simply watched the water beside him in silence, her fingers tracing the curved lines of his marble knuckles, breathing in the peace that came from knowing she was exactly where she needed to be. The villagers eventually noticed the woman who wandered the hills. Rumors bloomed like wildflowers. They whispered of a figure with moonlit eyes who roamed the cliffs each full moon. Some insisted she was mad, a warrior broken by grief. Others murmured that she had been chosen by something older than gods. But no one confronted her. No one dared. Something in her silence warned them away. Years slipped by. Winters sharpened the forests. Springs softened them again. Empires rose and crumbled. Kings were replaced by sons, and the voices of gods grew faint in mortal ears. Yet Leon did not change. She aged, but never weakened. Her strength became something deeper, something rooted, less the iron-hard discipline of a soldier and more the quiet endurance of an olive tree clinging to the same earth through storms and summers, refusing to fall. And still the statue remained unaltered. Apollo, locked forever on his knees, wings half spread behind him as if reaching for a flight he would never take again. His gaze, carved in stone, seemed fixed eternally upon the place she always sat. A single moment, frozen by divine punishment, completely untouched by the passing of time. Travelers told strange stories. They claimed that the marble was warm where one touched his chest, as though some faint echo of breath pulsed beneath the stone. Others swore they felt a heartbeat, thin, distant, like the echo of a dream long forgotten. Perhaps it was only legend. Perhaps it was truth. The grove alone knew. Then came one final full moon. Leona walked to the lake with her steady, familiar steps. She sat beside him as she had for decades and rested her head gently on his stone shoulder. Her eyes softened. Her breath grew slow. She closed her fingers around his frozen hand. And she never rose again. Weeks later, when villagers ventured near the grove, they found her exactly as she had sat, peace in her features, a faint smile lifting the corner of her mouth, as though she had finally found a rest she had been denied all her life. Beside her, Apollo's statue shimmered faintly with a warm inner glow. No one touched it. No shrine was built. No temple was declared. People simply walked away quietly, as though stepping out of a sacred dream. But the legend endured. It spread from hearth to hearth, carried by shepherds and wanderers. And now, in certain nights when the moon hangs full and the wind grows still, some say a white swan glides across the lake, never coming close, never lingering long. Not to be seen, only to remember. A millennium passed. He was not born in a palace, nor beneath painted ceilings or the smoke of temple offerings. He entered the world beneath the swaying branches of a willow during a storm that sliced the night sky in two. His mother, a midwife's daughter, held him in trembling arms while thunder cracked the heavens. But when the rain softened and the lightning faded, the child made no cry. He hummed. From the moment he could toddle across packed earth, sound followed him. Water changed its pitch when he bent to drink. Leaves rustled in rhythm as he walked by. Birds altered their songs to match his tiny murmurs. He did not learn music. Music seemed to remember him. By 10, he could imitate any bird's call and weave it into melody. By 16, he touched a lyre as though it were an extension of his own pulse. Hardened warriors, men who had forgotten how to weep, found their eyes burning as he sang of rivers, of brothers lost to war, of the quiet ache left behind after triumph. People called him gifted, blessed, born of divine breath. He never claimed any of it. Millennium wandered from one village to another, sharing songs with no expectation, no pride. His voice soothed fevers. His chords steadied trembling hands. Once, he sat beside a dying child and played a simple lullaby. The child smiled and drifted into death like slipping into a warm dream. But not every listener was mortal. One spring evening, as he sat beside a shimmering river strumming notes about starlight, the world shifted. The wind paused. The water stilled. Even the frogs silenced themselves. Then they appeared, the muses. 9 figures stepped from a shimmer in the air, wrapped in robes woven from light and layered with the essence of their domains. History, tragedy, dance, epic poetry, and more. Their eyes were neither merciful nor cruel. They simply saw. They listened to him. And then, to his amazement, they sang back. 9 voices, ancient and perfect, harmonizing in a sound older than dawn. Millennium opened his mouth, unsure, but his voice joined theirs effortlessly, as if he had sung with them for centuries. When the final note dissolved, even the stars above seemed to lean closer. Calliope, stern and regal, the eldest of the 9, touched his brow. "You are not ordinary," she said. "You are a vessel." And so began the whispered legend of Millennium, the bard whose voice stirred heaven itself. From that night onward, he was changed. The muses invited him into their sacred sphere deep in the folds of Mount Pelion, where few mortals ever walked. Under their tutelage, he did not learn through instruction, he absorbed through experience. Calliope taught him how to twist the shape of a story into pure sound. Clio murmured the histories of empires to him as he slept. Talia danced barefoot through leaves while he played, teaching his fingers the rhythm of movement and breath. Euterpe placed her flute in his hand and whispered, "Listen." And he did. He listened to the truths hidden between words. The quiet that comes before thunder. The ache buried beneath a widow's breath. The longing in a child's gasp as they witnessed their first snowfall. When winter's first flakes drifted through the mountain forest, the muses offered him no power, only clarity. A deeper way of hearing, a deeper way of feeling. And their price was simple. Sing for them. Meaning, sing for mortals. For the wounded, the proud, the forgotten. Those who needed beauty to remind them they were still alive. At first, Millennium obeyed. He played in village squares and royal courts alike. He sang in meadows and battlefields. His voice healed grief, sparked rebellions, knit families back together. His songs were balm and blade in equal measure. But as his gift grew, a seed of ambition took root. He began chasing a sound no living creature had ever heard. Notes no muse had taught him. Nights spent carving fragments of a melody beyond words. Something that could bend time, still the wind, draw tears from stone. His final song, he told no one, not even the muses, because part of him no longer wanted to share the divine. He wanted to surpass it. The muses saw the change, not in his hands, but in his gaze, a glimmer of hunger, the glance of someone looking past them towards something greater. And somewhere far beyond the mountain, fate stirred, because no mortal walks alongside the divine forever without cost. Millennium withdrew from the world he had once known. The applause, the gifts, the acclaim of kings and cities. All of it faded behind him like smoke curling into a distant sky. He abandoned the lyres of students, the council of muses, even the company of those who had once revered him. Rumors swirled among villagers and wandering minstrels. Some said he had fallen to sickness, others whispered of death. But the truth was far stranger. He had descended into solitude, seeking the shadowed slopes of Mount Hallucinations, deeper than any mortal had dared, where only the echoes of forgotten gods lingered in the air like lingering incense. There, in a cavern lined with crystals that sang when kissed by sunlight or moonbeam, Millennium found the music that had haunted his soul, the final song. It came to him not in instruction but in fragments, half seen in dreams, half thunder, half silence. Sometimes it arrived while he slept, sometimes it thundered across the mountain's ridge, twisting with his heartbeat, shifting with the rise and fall of his breath. It was not a melody for applause, not a chant for worship. It was truth itself, hidden between the folds of existence, ancient and unyielding. And it frightened him. He did not write it. He discovered it, like a secret folded into the spine of the world. Each note revealed a birth, each chord a death, each harmony the turning of the cosmos. He labored endlessly. Days melted into nights. Nights bled into months. Time inside the crystal cavern warped around him. He ate little, slept less, and yet the song poured through him, not through fingers or voice, but through the marrow of his being. He laughed at its beauty, wept at its enormity. The song was not joyous, not sorrowful. It simply existed, raw and unyielding. When the final note dissolved into silence, the world itself seemed to pause. Trees leaned into the windless mountain, rivers stilled mid-current. The clouds hung suspended in a sky that no longer flowed. Above, in Olympus' white marble halls, the gods stirred, imperceptibly, their eyes turning toward the mountain. Even the fates, those ancient spinners of destiny, paused in their weaving, hearing what had never been heard before. A thread of the cosmos quivered, uncertain, but the song required no witness. It was its own authority. The gods waited. The muses waited. Expectation clung to the air like mist. But Millennium remained silent. He did not return to the world of applause or adoration. He hid the song, folding it back into himself. And in that withholding, he set another music in motion, a melody of consequence, of absence, of quiet that pressed upon the bones of the world. When he finally emerged, the world felt smaller, thinner, as if the song had stretched reality and then left it hollow. Crowds and priests, kings and minstrels, all pressed forward, pleading to hear even a fragment, to touch the note that had bent time and stirred the heavens. But he said nothing. He smiled faintly, and the silence itself became an answer, chilling and absolute. The muses appeared at dusk, stepping out of the folds of starlight like spirits summoned by moonlight. Their robes glimmered, their eyes heavy with both admiration and warning. "You were chosen to carry beauty," Calliope's voice whispered, soft but insistent. "Yet beauty is not meant to be buried," Cleo added. And though they spoke, he did not flinch, bow, or reply. "I will not see it cheapened," he said, voice steady, colder than the winds outside the cavern. "You think mortals worthy of this?" He met their gaze. "You think I am merely a guardian? No, I am its keeper." Silence fell like winter, unbroken, and the muses vanished, leaving him alone. Even Olympus, even Su, who rarely turned attention to mortal affairs, paused mid-thunder. Even Hades tilted his shadowed head. They waited for a note, a fragment, a whisper, but none came. The song remained locked within him, sacred and untouchable. He performed other melodies for mortals, still beautiful, still stirring tears and awe. Crowds cheered, hearts mended, fathers and daughters reconciled. But he knew, and so did the divine, that something essential had been hidden. The song that could bend time, touch the gods, stir destiny itself, remained buried beneath his pride. He told himself it was protection. The muses knew the truth, it was ego. And the gods, ancient and enduring, who had witnessed madness, war, and worship without pause, do not tolerate the theft of divinity. One night, the wind stopped. The stars fell silent. And a new force came. Not wrath, not fire, not judgment, but a curse of memory. It came as a gentle darkness, a dream that cradled millennium beneath the vast, still sky he had once treasured. Sleep claimed him, soft and insistent, and in that quiet, the final song returned, not as a memory, but as reality. Notes he had never written, harmonies he had never imagined, wove themselves around him. It lifted him through stars, threaded him into oceans, unspooled the very fabric of existence. Tears streamed down his face. He wept with awe, joy, surrender, and then with mourning. The song that had been his alone, forged in silence and sacrifice, vanished. Every note, every phrase, every cadence, gone, dissolved into the air like mist at sunrise. At first, he thought it a trick, a cruel mirage of the sleeping mind. He seized his lyre, strummed desperately, fingers bleeding, eyes wild, but the music would not return. The melody of truth, the culmination of all he had been and all he could be, remained beyond him, invisible and untouchable. Night after night, he returned to the cave, to the mountain, to the dreaming. The song reappeared in dreams, richer, brighter, impossibly perfect. It played through him, through light and air, through stars and rivers. And always, with the dawn, it vanished. He tried to write, to capture even a single measure, a single breath, a single heartbeat. But the song fled each time, leaving him hollow, haunted, yet alive. He stopped performing. He stopped speaking. Friends departed. Cities grew quiet. The muses whispered among themselves, and the mortal world forgot him. But Millennium cared for none of it. His obsession was singular, absolute, to remember the song. And though the music remained distant, watching him with sorrow, he endured. Alone, unseen, unbroken, waiting for the impossible return of a truth too great for mortal hands, yet embedded in the core of his being, a melody that could unmake the heavens themselves. He was given a gift, whispered OTP, and he chose to cage it. Now he is the only one who will hear it. Cleo murmured, her voice both mournful and sharp, threading through the unseen halls of fate. It was not vengeance. It was balance. The song, the final song, would visit him each night like a lover, intimate, consuming, alive, yet each dawn it would vanish, slipping through cracked fingers, leaving him hollow and grasping at shadows. And yet he could not stop chasing it. He could not. And over time, hope curdled into obsession, and obsession morphed into madness. Each night, the song embraced him, full and radiant, whispering secrets older than the wind. Each morning, he awoke alone, screaming in terror at the emptiness where meaning had been. At first, he sought cunning ways to preserve it. He hired scribes, children of the villages, to watch over him, to write, to memorize, to steal from his mind whatever fragments survived. He played to mirrors, coaxing, pleading, thinking his reflection might betray the elusive melody. Nothing worked. Slowly, the edges of his mind frayed like parchment in fire. His robes hung loose on his gaunt frame. His fingers trembled when he reached for his lyre, once cradled as though it were a child, strings snapping under the strain of his trembling hands. He did not repair them. He did not need them. For in dreams, the song still came, perfect, alive, unyielding. The waking world became punishment. The sun was a thief, the daylight a torment. He cursed it, smashed his windows, draped his room in shadow, sealing himself away from the world. Yet even so, at dawn, the song slipped away. Each day, he wandered through towns and villages, gaunt and wild-eyed, unrecognizable from the golden-voiced bard they had once known. People pitied him, then feared him. Children ran from his shadow. Once great kings and kings' sons who had bowed to hear him now looked away in discomfort. "Have you heard it?" he would ask strangers. "The song with no beginning and no end. Have you heard it in your dreams?" Few understood. Some called him mad. Some whispered that the gods had cursed him. And in truth, they were not wrong. He sang fragments aloud, jagged bursts of melody that made no sense to anyone but himself. Each note was a clue, a shard of a mirror too vast to assemble. Each night, the melody returned in its perfection, shining and untouchable, mocking him with its presence. And each morning, he awoke again with only fragments lingering in his mind, never the whole. Laughter mingled with tears. Crying gave way to frantic smiles. Despair to fleeting hope. And yet, it was all meaningless, until nightfall brought it back again. Millennium became a shadow of himself. His body walked the world, but his mind had already fled into dreams. His feet traversed the roads of towns that had once welcomed him with open arms. His hands touched the ground, old stone walls, and even the faces of children, yet he was never present. He spoke to shadows, to the wind, to the stars, begging them to remember, begging them to sing back, convinced the melody existed somewhere outside of him, hiding in someone else's voice. He followed children, strangers, animals, trees, any creature that made sound, but each note was only a ghost, insufficient, ordinary. Each night, the final song returned to him in dreams. It was a lover, a divine presence, a fire that consumed his soul. He could not capture it. He could not carry it. He could only hear it. And when he woke, emptiness. The memory of sound without the sound itself, the ache of knowing without knowing why. It was a torment that gnawed at the marrow of his being. Years bled into decades. His hair grayed, then whitened, then thinned to wisps. His skin, once kissed by sunlight, became pale as frost. His frame was skeletal, hands knotted with veins and trembling from years of longing. People avoided him. They said he was cursed, that he had been touched by the divine and broken by it. Those who had known him as a boy, as a prodigy, as a gift, now whispered of him as a warning. Do not seek to hold what is not yours, lest you be undone like Millennium. Yet still he wandered, across mountains, over rivers, through forests, from village to village. He slept under trees, in empty chapels, at thresholds of inns, wherever he could find a place to rest. He no longer asked for food. He no longer sought conversation. He lived for the moment he could fall into sleep, to hear the song return, perfect and untouchable. Sometimes he believed he glimpsed fragments outside the dream. A wind that hummed a forgotten melody. A bird that trilled the curve of a note. A child whistling the fragment of a scale. He followed these threads, desperate. Once, he chased a boy across villages, convinced the child had carried the song in his voice. The boy sang only ordinary notes, and Millennium collapsed in dust, laughing and weeping in equal measure. Time became meaningless. The world continued around him. Empires rose and fell, rivers shifted, forests grew and withered, but he was caught between the waking world and the dream, listening, waiting, longing. His mind fractured, his body grew gaunt, yet in the night, the music remained whole. It would not leave him. It could not. It existed outside the confines of mortal comprehension, alive in the echo of eternity. He began speaking to the wind. He begged the stars to sing to him. He whispered to the trees and the waves and the stones. And sometimes, faintly, it seemed as though they hummed back. But always, the melody was elusive, slipping from memory like water through fingers. His hands shook perpetually, his voice was hoarse, his eyes wild with the ghost of a song he could no longer hold. Years turned to decades, decades to centuries. He became a myth, a wandering ghost, a cautionary tale whispered in villages and cities. Mothers would hush their children. Do not follow him. Do not try to remember what cannot be remembered. And yet, in the darkness, he hummed. And in sleep, the song returned, brilliant and alive, touching him as it had once touched the world. One evening, Millennium wandered to a cliff overlooking the sea. Silence reigned. No towns, no roads, no prying eyes. Only the wind, the waves, and the stars. He seated himself against a stone, letting the sea breeze tangle his hair. His body was fragile, his mind fractured, yet for the first time, he did not weep. He did not sing. He closed his eyes, and the dream came. But this night was different. There was no delay, no struggle, no fragmentary chase. The final song was there from the beginning, full and complete, flooding him with its impossible brilliance. It poured through his bones, threading through every shadow and every light within him. It spoke of stars being born, of empires falling, of love, loss, eternity, and the sacred impossibility of memory. He listened. The wind stilled. The waves froze mid-crest. The stars seemed to lean closer. Millennium, broken and weary, let the music fill him completely. He was no longer the vessel, no longer the seeker, no longer the fractured bard. For a heartbeat of eternity, he was the song itself, infinite, untouchable, and finally, at rest. The world outside waited, as it always had, for the return of its voice. But Millennium needed nothing beyond this. Not applause, not remembrance, not even understanding. For at last, the gift he had caged, the melody that had defined centuries, had returned to him. Not to possess, not to perform, but to exist, complete and eternal, within the vessel of his soul. But it was not just sound. It was a place, a presence, a world woven entirely from music. Millennium stood within it, barefoot on chords that bent like living grass beneath him, their vibrations carrying through his bones. Stars pulsed above him in rhythm, their light drumming in patterns older than memory. The sky itself was a symphony, vast and unending, the wind singing in harmony, weaving through invisible chimes and unseen harps. He was not merely hearing it. He was within it. He was the song, and the song was him. His own voice rose, not trembling, not searching, but free. It intertwined with the celestial chords, with the hum of earth and sky, the whisper of water and stone. Every note he had lost, every fragment that had slipped through his waking fingers, shimmered into place. Every phrase he had mourned, every cadence he had despaired of finding, soared around him, whole, vibrant, and alive. And in that space, he understood. The song had never truly left him. It had grown, shaped itself, become something beyond human possession. It was not his to hold. It was something to witness, to feel, to surrender to. And in this final dream, there was no sorrow, no shame, no punishment. Only release, only belonging, only the radiance of being a part of something eternal. When the sun rose, Millennium did not awaken. The wind lifted gently around his still body, as if carrying away a final breath, a farewell offered in silence. Later, a shepherd walking the cliffs would find him, peaceful, serene, hands resting over his chest as though cradling an invisible lyre. No scroll, no recording, no remnants of the song could be found. Yet high in the coastal sky, the seabirds flew in formations unlike any natural pattern, as if dancing to music only they could hear. And for a brief, impossibly perfect moment, the sea itself seemed to sing, not in words, not in melody, but in something older, deeper, something he had finally become. Millennium was buried beneath a lone olive tree at the edge of the cliff where he had last rested. No priest performed rites. No mourners gathered in sorrow. Only the shepherd who had found him and a few villagers who remembered the stories stood silently, their heads bowed in respect. The air seemed to hold a subtle resonance, a hum like the echo of the final song, as if the world itself honored the presence of a mortal who had touched something eternal. And there, beneath the olive tree, the song lived on, not as a memory, not as a melody anyone could capture, but as something felt, something breathed into the earth, the sky, the wind, and the waves. Millennium had become legend, not in fame or in record, but in the very music of existence itself, a reminder that some gifts are too vast for the world to hold, and yet perfect when allowed to simply be. Faint echoes of the bard who once made even the gods pause lingered in the air. There was no monument, no marble statue, no grand hall of remembrance, only silence. Yet silence has a way of amplifying truth. In the years that followed, whispers began to spread across the land, carried by travelers and wandering storytellers. They said that if you passed the cliff under a new moon, When the wind was still and the world held its breath, you might catch a note, a single, fleeting fragment of a melody drifting through the air. Heartbreakingly beautiful. Not a full song, not even a phrase, but enough to make you stop, to make your chest tighten with recognition, even if you did not know why. Children began dreaming of music they had never heard, melodies that filled their sleep with wonder and longing. Musicians awoke in the dead of night, tears streaking their cheeks, with no memory of why, only the echo of perfection ringing in their minds. And sometimes, when a lone player sat at dusk with no audience, the strings beneath their fingers would hum in resonance, forming chords that were not theirs, something beyond them, impossibly precise and hauntingly alive. It was as if the song had escaped its mortal vessel, taking root in the world itself, alive in wind and water, in the tremor of leaves, in the silent spaces between heartbeats. Millennium had vanished from sight, but his music had become eternal, a secret threaded into the very fabric of existence. And those who were open, those who listened with patience and reverence, could feel it brush against their souls, fleeting yet eternal, a reminder that some songs do not belong to any one life, but to all of time. They never remembered it. By the light of dawn, the delicate threads of sound that had woven through millennium's soul dissolved like mist. The muses watched silently, their faces calm, knowing that the song had already moved beyond mortal comprehension. They did not curse another bard, nor did they reclaim the music. They understood that millennium had become something else entirely, not a warning, not a hero, but a vessel, a soul transformed by the weight of what he had carried. His punishment was not born of cruelty, nor of divine wrath. It was a consequence of refusal, the refusal to yield his treasure to the world, the refusal to let the song be used, played, or known. And yet his redemption came not through sharing, but through surrender, the quiet acceptance that the music belonged not to him, but to existence itself. The final song was never written down. It was never performed in amphitheaters filled with cheering crowds, nor in temples where incense curled toward the heavens. It does not exist in scrolls, in manuscripts, in the careful hand of chroniclers, or the hurried scripts of scribes. It does not wait for discovery in libraries or palaces. It exists only in fleeting moments, in the spaces between heartbeats, in the soft hush before a performer strums their first chord, when the world itself seems to pause to listen. It lives in the way the sea sighs differently under a grieving moon, the way wind curves around the hills at twilight, the way shadows stretch long and silver before sunrise. Millennium's music became part of the world itself, not a thing to be remembered, not a possession, not a trophy for human admiration, but an essence, a presence that moved through everything and everyone with subtle, impossible persistence. It thrummed in the bones of those who had felt loss, had known longing, or had glimpsed beauty beyond measure. Children dreaming under starlight would hum fragments of it without knowing why, their small voices carrying echoes of a song older than empires. Farmers would pause in their work at noon, their fingers brushing soil as though tracing invisible strings, feeling the rhythm of something they could not name. Even animals, wild and untamed, would shift, their steps lighter, their calls attuned to a melody that existed only in the spaces they could not perceive. It was everywhere and nowhere. The song did not need ears to exist, only hearts willing to feel. Millennium had poured his life into it, and in doing so, he had transcended mortal limitations. His music became not a legacy, but a presence, a force of nature. To seek it deliberately was to fail. It revealed itself only when the world was still enough, when attention was soft and expectation fell away. One could hear it in the hush before rain, in the tremor of leaves under moonlight, in the shiver of air across a quiet village. It was never complete, never permanent. It did not belong to anyone, and yet it touched all. The muses, who had once guided him with their stern, luminous presence, understood the gravity of what had been wrought. They had gifted him the world's attention, its harmony, and yet he had refused it. And so, in refusing, He had claimed a kind of immortality beyond their dominion. The song was not silenced, but it could no longer be possessed, measured, or tamed. It became a shadow of transcendence, moving through the world with quiet insistence. Millennium himself had long vanished from human sight. He wandered cliffs and coasts, forests and valleys, barefoot and gaunt, a figure of myth in his own time. Villagers would speak of a wandering bard whose eyes held storms and whose whispers seemed to carry wind itself. Travelers glimpsed him beneath moonlight, singing fragments of melodies they did not remember upon waking. They would awake in the quiet hours with tears on their cheeks and no memory of the music, only the echo of its wonder. Some swore the notes had brushed against their hearts, leaving a mark, a memory too faint to grasp, yet impossible to forget entirely. It was not grief that the song carried, nor joy, nor any mortal emotion. It was a reflection of the universe itself, the rising and falling of tides, the turning of stars, the fragile rhythm of existence. It was a song that could not be claimed, for it belonged simultaneously to every fleeting moment and to eternity. Millennium had understood that the song's power lay not in human admiration, not in accolades, but in its quiet persistence. Even as the world forgot him, as kingdoms rose and fell, as cities crumbled and rivers shifted, the song endured. It waited in the silent spaces, the hidden corners, the places where hearts could pause, where ears could bend to catch the intangible. And so the legend of Millennium endured, not in words or monuments, but in experience. It was the pause in the musician's breath before the first note, the sudden harmony of wind and water in a valley long forgotten, the strange clarity in a child's dream that fades before they can speak of it. It moved without purpose, unbound by history, immune to ambition or fear. It existed as it always had, as it always would, a reminder that the deepest, most profound beauty cannot be owned, only witnessed. Those who try to capture it would fail. Those who sought it intentionally would find only emptiness. But those who listened without expectation, who opened their hearts without demand, might feel it brush against their soul for a moment, fleeting as sunlight through leaves. And in that brief encounter, they would remember that beauty exists beyond human comprehension, beyond the constraints of time, beyond all memory. The song had become its own world, and Millennium, its silent witness, had finally become one with it. The final song, therefore, exists everywhere and nowhere. It is not a piece to be performed, nor a melody to be sung. It does not wait for applause, nor for recognition. It resides in the world's quiet corners, in the invisible threads between life and dreams, in the spaces where loss and wonder converge. It reminds all who encounter it, even unknowingly, that there are things greater than fame, greater than legacy, greater than life itself. Things that exist simply to be felt, to be experienced, to remind the world of the infinite, unclaimable, enduring beauty of sound, of life, of being. In the hush of evening, in the wind over cliffs, in the pause before a child hums in their sleep, Millennium's song still lives. Not to be remembered, not to be recorded, not to be taught or passed down. It lives as a living presence in the world, eternal and untouchable, a song that exists because someone once refused to cage it, because someone once surrendered, because a human heart carried the divine and then let it go. And in that surrender, the world itself learned what it meant to listen. There are stories that linger not in words, not in songbooks or scripts, but in the bones. The faintest echoes of a music that never belonged to this world, a melody so vast it cannot be captured, only felt. Those who have glimpsed it, even for a heartbeat, carry its memory as a weight, a thrill, a sorrow. And yet, the silence that follows is more profound than the sound itself, as though the universe holds its breath for eternity. Millennium walked the earth with this gift. Once he had known the full sweep of his music, the way it could bend hearts, soften stone, make the very air tremble with wonder. The muses watched, the gods paused, and men called him divine. But there was one song that could not be held, one song that had never been written down, never performed, never shared. It was a melody of existence itself, a song of creation, loss, love, and remembrance. He first heard it in dreams, before he knew the weight of his own mortality. In sleep, he stood barefoot on invisible chords, as the wind sang through stars and rivers, and the earth hummed beneath him. Every night, the melody whispered through his bones, its rhythm entwining with his heartbeat. When he awoke, it vanished. Not the notes, not the fragments, not a single memory could remain. And so began his obsession, chasing what could never be captured. The world knew him once as a bard, a prodigy, a vessel of divine sound. Kings summoned him, temples adored him, children followed him like shadows, learning to believe that music could hold the weight of the world. And yet, the one melody that mattered, the one song that carried all creation in its chords, was never his to own. It slipped through his fingers each dawn, leaving only the ghost of what he had heard. He tried to catch it. He sang to mirrors, to scribes, to the winds that carried leaves in harmonic arcs. He chased it across fields, down alleys, through villages and sleeping towns. He begged strangers to hum, to listen, to remember. And yet, it never remained. Each night, it returned, perfect, whole, taunting. And each morning, it left him with nothing but the aching memory of a song he could no longer hold. Millennium's life became a thin thread between worlds, between waking and dreaming, presence and absence, sanity and despair. He wandered barefoot beneath moonlight, his hair tangled by the wind, his eyes reflecting the ghosts of melodies he could never recall. People pitied him at first, then feared him. Children who once sat at his knees ran from him. Kings who once bowed to him now whispered his name in caution. Do not end up like Millennium. Through all this, he never stopped listening. He never stopped hoping. And yet, the song had outgrown him. It was not his, and it never had been. It was a world within sound, a place one could step into only for a fleeting moment before the dawn stripped it away, leaving the listener hollow and trembling. And then there was Melania, who had understood before anyone else. She never tried to possess it. She never demanded it be given or shared. She only waited, quietly, in the hush between his notes and the silent spaces after. She knew the weight of the melody, the cost of touching it even for an instant. And perhaps it was for her devotion that the song lingered in the world at all, not in notes or instruments, but in the quiet places between the breaths of mortals, in the hush of dawn and the whisper of the cliffs. On the right night, on the right cliff, if the wind is kind, if the world holds still, the melody can be glimpsed again. Not the song in its entirety, but a fragment, a single breath of the perfection Millennium once knew. Those who hear it feel the weight of the impossible, the ache of beauty they cannot own, and the quiet understanding of why Melania never let it go. Even now, travelers tell of it, a note carried on a midnight wind, a fragment of a symphony older than memory, brushing past ears and hearts, leaving only a tremor in its wake. Children dream of music they have never heard. Musicians awake in the night, tears on their cheeks, unable to place the source of their longing. In the silence, in the echo, in the empty spaces, Millennium lives on, not as a man, not as a bard, but as the whisper of a song that will never end, a song that belongs to no one and to everyone all at once. The world keeps moving, kingdoms rise and fall, storms sweep across seas, and stars wheel above in indifferent arcs. But if you stand alone, listen closely, and let the wind caress your ears, the fragment may find you. And in that moment, you will understand the truth of the final song, that beauty is not possession, that music is a vessel of eternity, and that sometimes the greatest gift is the one you can only feel.